Okay, well, we're on the home stretch, and so my goal now is to share with you the fourth initiation and maybe a few words about the fifth. And then we'll open it up for questions, okay? So let's begin. So we've covered up to the third initiation, and remember the third initiation is where you're now fully soul infused as a personality, and you've awoken to the monad for the first time. And as I said, after the third initiation, your whole meditative life changes, and there's a whole different approach to meditation, actually. And there's a desire to find that upper door, that other exit, you might say, at the top of the library, so to speak. So the fourth initiation is a very, very pivotal one. And it's difficult as well. So it is said that the second initiation is the most painful, and the fourth initiation is the most difficult. I hope I have that right. It could be reversed. Either way, they're not easy. And it's called the crucifixion initiation. The crucifixion in the West. In the East, it has another name. It's called the Great Renunciation. The Great Renunciation. And as I share with you this step, you'll see why the rich young man went sadly away and why there's delay, because this is a tough step. So what happens is this. After the third initiation, between the third and the fourth, there's said to be a tremendous amount of synthesis of information that is absorbed into you. You're synthesizing a lot of information. And part of that has to do with the petals of the lotus. I'm going to get that visual of the petals up here again so that we see that. And remember that these red petals, those are the sacrifice petals. They correspond to the first initiation, second, and third. And then I said that at the third initiation, there's enough petal open that you see the monad for the first time. That's the jewel in the lotus. But there's these yellow petals. They're called the synthesis petals, and they are, strangely enough, they're referred to as translucent, which is why even at the third initiation they're closed. You can kind of see through them, and that's why at the third initiation you are seeing the monad for the first time. But even that means the monad is still, even at the third initiation, though witnessed, it's attenuated. But these three petals are going to open between the third and the fourth initiation, and they're called the synthesis petals. And so a lot of it's not like new knowledge is coming in, but a synthesis of already acquired knowledge. And one of the outstanding characteristics of this particular initiation is that it represents a time when you've completely demonstrated the transformation of all personally generated karma throughout your life. So you are free from karma, and that's absolutely required to take the fourth initiation. Free from karma. Now, when I say free from karma, I mean free from all karma that is personally or has been personally generated over the vastness of your many incarnations. All of it has been transformed. Now, a fourth degree initiate is still subject to what you might call global karma or planetary karma. But in terms of individualized karma, you're free from that. And by the way, that's why at the fourth initiation, you have 100% atomic substance. Remember, we talked about the substance of the vehicles, 100%. So there's no taint, there's no distortion left to be transformed, and therefore no karma is left in the system. That is why at the fourth initiation, after you've taken it, there's no necessity to reincarnate any longer. I know, I can't tell you how many people I've met over the years who have said, this is my last incarnation. If they only knew what they were talking about. I mean, if they only realized, you'd have to be a fourth degree initiate to say that. What's really happening is that a lot of people say, you know, I've been on this path a long time. I've worked hard. This life has been challenging, but I've worked through it. Surely I'm no longer needing to reincarnate. I'm not coming back. But really, that's just the personality saying, it's been a tough road. I need a break. But the truth is that you're coming back. You have no choice. There's no choice at all. As long as there's dissonance, which is held within the causal body, the necessity of reincarnating is inescapable. Now, one of the interesting things, though, about this initiation is that it's where it becomes really difficult is that you are at a when you're working your way toward the fourth initiation, and by the way, this one can be taken in the same incarnation as the third or the next. So you see, we're still accelerating. That in that stretch, for much of it, you're fully aware of the monad. It's blazing bright inside. And you're realizing that that monad is not just powerful, but in a way, it's really the you are destined to be. And in a way, you're already that. You just have to come into the fullness of it. That's why it is said that the path is really about going deep as you can inside and finally arriving at the place that technically you never really left, only thought you did. And so you get to this, as you're approaching it, and you're using the light of the monad, it's blazing in there for you. It's like, and you might interpret it as God, because it is the God in you, but it's not just the God in you, it's the God as you, because you and I are cells of beingness. Remember, in this philosophy, it's not about there's a God out there in creation. It's instead God as creation, not God and creation. And God as creation means that in the ultimate sense, we are the divinity we seek. And that divinity is what we refer to as the monad. And so you're moving toward the monad. But here's where the challenge is. As the disciple is approaching the fourth initiation and the initiatory moment, all of a sudden, the light of the monad goes click off, suddenly disappears internally. I can't see it anymore. And so there's a very challenging thing here, because not only is there no more karma in the system, which means there's no pull. There's no pull that's going to take you back into the world, the flesh and the devil, so to speak, the outer world, no more incarnational pull. And at the same time, the light of the monad has disappeared, and you have this realization that you've now got to destroy the causal body, the very thing that up to this point has been perceived as being your eternal home, because the causal body in a way is like a home. In other words, for countless incarnations, we're kind of wanting to be the wisdom of our causal body and wanting to be that level of love. And it feels like that's our destination, only to realize that when you pass the third initiation and approach the fourth initiation, you realize, oh, my causal body is now getting in the way. Just as prior to that, a lot of times we're looking at the personality as sort of getting in the way. Now the causal body itself is getting in the way. And so the causal body has to be destroyed. And I know that sounds so strange, because it's the storehouse of your wisdom. Why would we want to destroy that? Why would we want to destroy that? Well, just keep in mind that even though it is the storehouse of your wisdom, remember your causal body is found on the higher mental plane. In fact, if you look at that Constitution document that is part of the handouts, and if you look at the mental plane, you'll see a little black triangle. That's the causal body, and you'll find it on the higher mental plane. And And you'll see the monad is much higher than that. You see the monad is that circle toward this on the second plane, way up at the top. Now, that causal body, as wise as it is, as sacred as its content is still form, friends. It's still form. It's part of the plane, of the mental plane. The three lower planes, mental, emotional, and physical, are called rupa planes. When we use kind of a theosophical or Hindu language, rupa means form, whereas the planes above it, those are arupa, no form. So just remember, your causal body, as sacred as it is, it's still in the realm of form. And all the wisdom stored in your causal body is still a type of form. A lofty form, yes. Earned form, yes. Filled with insight about life, yes. But it's still form. And to really go into the eternal abode, so to speak, and not have to reincarnate, even that becomes a weight that holds you back. So the causal body has to be destroyed. And you might say, well, what about all that wisdom that's been gathered? And the answer is this. It's in that process of synthesis that the solution to that is found, and those synthesis petals. Because you see, what happens as you approach this crucifixion initiation is that the essence, the essential formless essence of all the wisdom you have garnered, stored in that causal body, that essence is synthesized into the fabric of your beingness, into the thing we call monad. So by the time you get there, you've got the essence of it as part of your very beingness. You don't need a causal body anymore. You don't need a wise thought to represent some essence. You are that essence. You are that essence at that point. So you go through the crucifixion experience. You see, that's what's crucified at the fourth initiation. It's your causal body that's crucified. Actually, the Master Jesus, 2,000 years ago, is said to have taken the fourth initiation, and that's a crucifixion. Now, we're told in the story that his body was crucified. Okay, did that happen? Probably. But what's really important is the symbolism behind that for us, because what is the body of Christ for us? It's your causal body. And the causal body has to go through a crucifixion as well. So it's not like you're nailed to a physical cross, but you're nailed to an inner psychological cross, so to speak. And how the causal body is destroyed is quite interesting, actually, because it depends upon the ray of your monad. Now, not to get too immersed in that subject, but there are 7 rays, and you could have, there are 7 types of souls. There are also 7 types of personalities. But when it comes to the level of consciousness of monad, there's only 3. There's first ray monads, second ray monads, and third ray monads. And I won't go into the reason behind that, only to say that it represents kind of the ultimate trinity, okay? A first ray monad is a monad of pure will. A second ray monad is very much about love and wisdom, and the third ray monad is active intelligence. Now, all of those are sacred and equally sacred, and there are 3 types of monads, human monads, that is. And how the causal body will be destroyed is determined by the ray of the monad. So if, for instance, if a person has a first ray monad and they're going to take the fourth initiation, the first ray monad that's the very destructive energy of will, and it uses will and it literally shatters the causal body. The second ray monad of love and wisdom, that monad, instead of shattering the causal body, it kind of massages itself loose from it. and well, that's the funny thing. Even when I think about the soul, how does the first ray soul find enlightenment? It takes the kingdom of heaven by storm. How does the second ray soul find enlightenment? It massages its way to enlightenment. It's anyway, so in a way we could say the same thing of monad. And the third ray monad will simply, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's such an active ray that it will kind of chop it apart, punch holes in it until it loses all of its structural integrity. Now, without getting too far into it, you have to understand there's a whole discussion about what is the causal body and how is it formed. And I'm just going to put this out there without going too far down the road here, but your causal body is actually made up of high-level substance, but that substance is actually of another entity. That substance is from a solar angelic entity. So you have a solar angel that has been overshadowing you for 18 million years, give or take a couple. And the solar angel is not giving up its full self to your causal body, but what it's doing is it's giving a part of its own nature and its own substance for you to use, first as a primitive human being, all the way up to developing full consciousness as a master before it's done its work. So there's a wonderful discussion about not only the origin of the solar angels, but how they influence our consciousness and we grow through them. So this solar angel, sometimes I use a simple metaphor. Or imagine this, if I were that solar angel, which is an absolutely ridiculous assumption, but if I were, and I'm responsible for, I'm forced, and there's a whole reason why the solar angel is forced, but I'm forced to attend to this one human being and provide a high level of substance to that one human being in order to help that one human being evolve consciousness and eventually rise out of the human domain into the fifth kingdom of nature. Now, I'm going to use, if your solar angel is so evolved, your solar angel is equivalent on the angelic line to the consciousness of the Christ. I mean, really, you think about it. We're told that the Christ is a seventh degree initiate, and most human solar angels are seventh degree initiates on the angelic line. Ooh, I'm so tempted to go down here, but I better not do too far. But it's like, if I were that angel, it's like I'm going to take my fingertip, just a little part of my fingertip, and I'm going to enshroud the substance of my angelic fingertip over that human being of a high level, subtle energy, and that becomes the causal body. So that's why that when we say the causal body isn't really of you, what I'm saying is it's actually of an angelic entity. And so that that angelic entity is with you all the way from the beginning when you individualized millions of years ago, but you're unconscious of it. And then when you have the awakening and suddenly you're awake to it, it's like the causal body's been discovered, which means in a way the angel's been discovered. And I just think to myself, if I were that angel and I'm waiting 18 million years for this little human being to figure out that I'm there to help, my first reaction would be, it's about time. and so that's when the solar angel begins to put more energy and attention toward that little human being once you've had the awakening, and that's the source of the downward gazing soul. Anyway, back to the fourth initiation, that causal body is destroyed. Now, it's really the substance is not destroyed, but what's destroyed is the cohesion that holds it together, and the solar angel is then now free to move on. So it's a wonderful subject when you get into the subject of the solar angel in the fullest sense, but that will help you perhaps understand what I mean when I say the causal body, what it is, and why it has to be destroyed, because the essence of the wisdom that is stored in it is now part of your beingness, you see. But you have to prove yourself because the light from the monad has been turned off. The pull of the outer world is no longer there because there's no longer karma. And you have to destroy the causal body, the one thing that you thought was your eternity. See what I mean? Not an easy thing. By the way, there's so what happens is that once you go through the crucifixion, then boom, and the causal body is destroyed, boom, the monad returns in full glory and full radiance once again. You just have to go through that process. You have to demonstrate such a profound understanding and trust that even though the light of the monad is missing, even though there's no pull from below, even though you've got to destroy the home you thought was your eternity, there's something inside that says it's still the way to go. And you go through that, and that's what liberates you finally, and into the next full participation in the next kingdom of nature, full entrance into the ashram. In fact, the biblical story of this is really interesting. You may remember in the Christian story about Jesus on the cross, remember when, while on the cross, he said something like, my Father, why have thou forsaken me? Let's translate that in occult language. Monad, why have thou forsaken me? That's the Father in you. That's the Father in me. Your monad is the divinity that is your, it's not the God in the ultimate sense, but it's the God in the relative sense within your very being. It's the ultimate God immanent in you. And now you are it. And that's the fourth initiation. And you know that there's another story in the Bible, and you remember how when the tomb is, the stone is rolled aside and they walk in and they see that Jesus is no longer there, but his robe is there. Well, that's occultly understood as the symbol. What does it go? My robe that gave me strength is no longer there. That robe that's left is thought to be the metaphoric symbol of the shedding of the causal body, which in a way is a garment, a robe that the monad has been using all along. So it's quite a profound sense, and that's when you truly can say, I and my Father are one. I mean, we say that anyway, but the truth of it is that's the real living of it. But that darkness that you have to go through is the true dark night of the soul. You see, let me just talk about the dark night of the soul for a moment. That was a concept that was originated back, I think it was in the 16th century by, I think it was St. John of the Cross, as I recall. And we use that term a lot. You know, people say, oh, I'm going through a dark night of the soul experience, dark night of the soul experience. But if we really get technical, friends, that's not correct. For you and I, we don't have a dark night of the soul experience. What we call a dark night of the soul experience is really a dark night of the personality, not the soul. The dark night that we experience is not experienced by the soul, it's experienced by the personality who feels disconnected from the greater life for some mysterious way, who feels abandoned by some spiritual dimension that they had previously been aware of. That's technically a dark night of the personality, but it's okay. I mean, using that language, it's just, I'm sharing that with you so you can see a distinction that is actually important. The only true dark night of the soul experience is the fourth initiation, because the causal body, the soul vehicle, is going to go through this destructive process. So that's the dark night. Okay, now, real quick, I'll give you a little bit about the fifth initiation, and then I just want to open it up for questions. So the fifth initiation is just a very small refinement that takes place at such a level. It's where you really truly become a master. So for instance, in some of the Eastern language, a fourth degree initiate is often called an arhat, whereas the fifth degree initiate is often called an adept. And we would call that person a master of wisdom. So you technically become a master of wisdom in a technical sense at the fifth initiation. And so you are a master, which means you also have experienced the full Kundalini. You are a perfected individual now. You are, interestingly, a fifth degree person has the right of entrance into Shambhava, not the right of membership, because you have to be even higher to be a member, but you have the right of entrance into Shambhala. The fifth initiation has two names, but the main name, the correct name, is the initiation of the revelation, while in the West, it has been called the resurrection initiation. And I can see why the West would think that, because that's the story of Jesus and the resurrection. And it's fine to see it that way. That's valuable. But technically, it's called the revelation. Because what's revealed, you might ask? Well, when you study this, you realize that that the fifth initiation, it too is not the end. There's a sixth initiation, seven. I told you that the Christ and the Buddha, we believe, are seventh degree initiates. And what's interesting is that there's something called the higher way of evolution, and it's about the possibilities of evolution beyond being a master. And so there's the sixth initiation, seventh, eighth, and for some even ninth. Now, it's the point is that, how to put this? The sixth initiation, I'll just mention this, has a couple names, but one of them names is, it's called the initiation of the decision. And most of the masters that theosophy and esoteric philosophy that I'm connected with, those are sixth degree initiates. So we talk about the Master Moria, sixth degree initiate. We talk about Kuthumi, sixth degree. The Master Rakusi or Saint Germain, call him what you like, sixth degree. The Master Serapis Bey, who oversees the fourth ray ashram, that's sixth degree initiate. The Master Hilarion, fifth initiation. The Master Jesus, the sixth initiation. They're all heads of the big ashrams. The 7 major ashrams are all headed by a sixth degree initiate. And the Christ is overseeing all of them as a seventh degree initiate. But the sixth initiation is called the decision, because it has to do with a decision that has to be made about which of 7 paths will you take as a monad to evolve out of the Earth system altogether. So it's not until the sixth initiation that you can live in and start expanding outside the Earth. Again, in the New Age, I can't tell you how many people I've met who said, after this incarnation, I'm on my way to Sirius. If you only knew that you might be, but you got a long way to go. You have to be a sixth degree initiate to be that. You'd have to be a Master Moria to do that. So this decision is important, because at the sixth initiation, that decision of which of the 7 paths to go, and it is said that that choice is completely free-willed and paradoxically is predetermined. You have to. There's another paradox to be resolved. Okay, but the fifth initiation, the one we're talking about, that's called the revelation, because it's at the fifth initiation that you have a revelation of which of the paths will likely be the path that you will take when you reach the sixth initiation. So, but a fifth degree initiate is also going to create his or her own ashram. Now, look, there are these 7 big ashrams, and I could do a whole seminar on those 7. But within each ashram are many, many sub-ashrams. In fact, sometimes when you read the literature, you might read the 7 ashrams. Okay, that's the big ashrams. But sometimes you'll read and it'll say the 49 ashrams, the 49 ashrams. Well, that's because every one of the big ashrams has a major tier of sub-ashrams, 7 in number. So 7 times 7 is the 49. So I'm just giving you a hint as well, as when you read that, and you run into the term the 49 ashrams, realize that those are sub-ashrams headed by fifth degree initiates that oversee those ashrams. Occasionally, you'll see the writings of the 42 ashrams. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that, let's say that you're on the second ray ashram. You're part of the second ray ashram, but you're also part of the second sub-ray ashram. So they just combine the bigger and the smaller as one. So just realize that you're part of an inner ashram, but you also have a sub-quality. So like, for instance, let's say that you had a third ray soul. Okay, so you're part of the third ray ashram. Well, now, it is said that your third ray soul has two sub-rays to it. One of those sub-rays becomes the ray of the personality, and that will change each incarnation. But the other sub-ray, from what we can gather anyway, it appears that the other sub-ray is more permanent, and it's the energy of the sub-ray of the big ashram that you're from. And so when you get to be a fifth degree initiate, you're coming into a leadership position with some sort of a sub-ashram. There are the 49, and I believe, as I sense this, there are many other sub-ashrams as well. And those ashrams you lead. It is, and you have a responsibility for a download of many, many disciples at that point. It is said that the fifth degree master must utilize his or her ashram to manifest his or her masterpiece. The master must manifest a masterpiece in the outer world. So, and by the way, many of you, certainly by the time you get to the third initiation, you're already beginning the beginning phases of formulating your own ashram. The Tibetan talks about this in the Alice Bailey work, where a third degree initiate is organizing people, that people are the people that you're closest to, that you're influential, and you have a way of being an inspiration to their spirituality. Some of those people will one day become members of your ashram that you will in some future incarnation fully form. So even now, wherever you are on the path, as long as you're on the path, the relationships you establish and those that you are much more of a guide to others on their journey, some of those people will ultimately, in the big picture, in a few incarnations from now, those people will become part of your ashram and you'll be called the master. So anyway, I better stop. Let's open it up for questions, Renee.
Sue. Hi, William. So,
hello.
Hi, the last couple of sessions are probably a bit beyond me. I'm still stuck in the what's the purpose, but all this seems to assume that we're not going to destroy the planet before any of this can happen. If this is 18 million years away or whatever, even for the whole of humanity to get to this point, the planet, the way it's going, won't even be in existence. So what happens then? Where do we go? What happens?
Okay, great question. And let's be clear. Let's get this clear. It's the humanity is not destroying the earth. You're not destroying this. We're not destroying the planetary logos. We're destroying our own habitat so that we can't function physically. That's true, but it's grossly inaccurate to say that we're destroying the earth. That's nonsense. We're destroying our capacity to live on the earth, and that's a big crisis. And that's what the first initiation is so about. It's coming to a collective realization that together we have to make the changes to support humanity in its habitat for the future. And it's taken 18 million years for us to come to this point of high technology and to the realization of the great misstep in terms of our wrong relationship with Mother Nature. So I agree with you that I think the environmental issue is the most pressing crisis for humanity at this time. The only thing I'm trying to say is don't assume that means that the earth is destroyed. The planetary logos is going to be fine. It's just that we human parasites are destroying our capacity to live on it. So I hope that makes sense. And it seems overwhelming. It seems overwhelming, but all we can do is bring the best of us forward in our individual lives and support things that support environmental protection, and realize that there are millions of people like you who are awake and understand this, and in our collective capacity, we have the possibility of turning this around, and that's the hope. That's the hope.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. There's just something that brings to mind. There's a lot of people in the world with a lot of fear in this, in terms of fearing death, aren't they? So that is a work in itself, because we don't die. You know, who we truly are doesn't die, even if the planet goes south.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not going away. The whole planet, and it could be a nuclear holocaust, and all human life is gone, but not. It's only the form of life is gone. You will never go away. You are always. You are pure monad, and the monad, in its nature, in its beingness, it doesn't need to have a physical instrument. It needs a physical instrument to continue its evolution, but it doesn't need a physical instrument to exist, because it's just a spark of life from the one life. So my point is that, yeah, there's a lot of fear about it, but you're not going away. You are life itself. You see, that's the monad is life. I think it's such an irony that, people are talking about, oh, I'm pro-life or pro-choice. The reality is we haven't a clue what life is. We tend to, well, in the Alice Bailey tradition, the Tibetan tells us that until you get to the third initiation and sense the monad for the first time, we will only understand life once removed. We see a plant, we see an animal, we see a human being, and we say that's life. Well, that's not exactly correct. That's not life. That's life that is animating form. That's life animating form. But that's not life. Life is way beyond form. So that's the irony of the pro-choice, pro-life nonsense, because neither side knows what life is. I don't know what life is, really. All I know is that this philosophy is teaching us that when you finally come into those higher realms and you start to really relate to the monad, then you realize what life is, and you realize it's always been and always will be. So just kind of keep that in mind as well, okay?
Thank you. That's great. Barry. Barry.
Yes, I'd like to share a little of my personal experience. When I went to America, I was guided back 5,000 years to various incarnations, up to 5,000 years. I've never been able to go beyond 5,000 years. Is there some reason why there is a block there?
Oh, I'm not sure I can answer that question. There's multiple ways I could approach that. The first thing to know, just to be very frank with you, is that until a person is a third degree initiate, even the capacity to know and sense previous incarnations with certainty is only tenuous. Because at the third initiation, you're coming into the causal body fully. And the causal body is holding the storehouse of your incarnational history. Prior to that, no matter what you do, you could be on ayahuasca, you could do a whole bunch of stuff, and you might have some insights about previous incarnations, but it would be a mistake to be absolutely certain of the validity of those incarnations. And they may be valid, but don't be too certain about it, because unless you're a third degree initiate, the lower self still has the potential of giving slight distortions. And there's a lot of glamour in the subject of reincarnation. I mean, look, how many Cleopatras could there be? I've met many of them. Okay. So now to your question about 5,000 years, it could be that there's a reason why you're not able to go back further than that. It could be a karmic reason. It could be that you're not able to sense deep enough what's beyond that. So I don't have an answer for you. I just encourage everybody to realize, yes, you've lived many lives, but also don't be too hooked on, I was this person at this time. Realize it's a possibility. There's also, we're told that a lot of times people who have a previous life recognition, one of the dangers is that because we're part of an inner group, sometimes you're so close to an inner group that you're actually picking up the consciousness of the life history of somebody inwardly very close to you and wrongly believing it's yourself. So there's a whole big discussion about that. And maybe someday I could do a whole presentation for you on death and reincarnation, because it's a big subject. But anyway, that's the only thing I can say about that, sir. Thank you, though, for the question. Many times what we think is a master speaking to us is actually a petal of the causal body that's opening, profound high-level intelligence of your own causal body that's opening. And because it's new, the personality perceives it as another entity. I would say 90%, maybe 95% of all channeled information is not from another entity. It's from a higher aspect of one's own soul that is unfolding for the first time. And the lower self, because of the newness of it, perceives it as another entity. It's actually your own divinity being realized. So don't discount the possibility that sometimes the higher inspiration is actually coming from a higher part of you and it's brand new. And don't be too quick to assume that, oh, a master is speaking to me or some disincarnate entity. That's possible. That's possible. Of course, that's possible. But it's also very possible that it's your own divinity revealing more of itself to you.
What I was saying is that I learned that I am not a master, that I'm here to be a servant.
And that's how we all see it. We should all feel that we're becoming more and more a servant of something greater than ourselves. So true, so true.
Thank you.
I was curious, the fourth initiation at the disintegrating the cohesion of the causal body, is that anything, the rites in the Egyptian pyramids, where they have the initiation, where they go in for 3 days into the tomb, where it's complete lack of sensory anything. Is that anything that's related to that fourth initiation, just in principle?
Well, in principle, I mean, I'm not a scholar of the Egyptian system, although I know a bit about it. And in principle, it does make a lot of sense, and it's kind of equivalent to the idea of Jesus going to, to the underworld for 3 days before the resurrection idea. I think undoubtedly there is some sort of important correlation there, and so I think you're onto something. I'd have to study that more closely to say more about that, but I think your intuition is correct, that there's something there that is worth seeing a connection.
Yeah. I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a slight clarification on what you were saying earlier about, I think somebody mentioned about if the planet gets, or you said if the planet gets exploded with atomic energy or atomic bombs or something like that, and we won't die, we don't stop being. But if the planet stops being, where do we go? Where does that causal or whatever element of life, where do we end up?
Well, okay, so let's be clear. When the planetary logos is a transcendent, it's a deity to us, and that you and I are not separate from it, we're constituent parts of it. In fact, all the kingdoms of nature, so not just the human kingdom, but the animal, plant, mineral, also even beyond that, higher than that, all of those kingdoms of nature are simply layers of the consciousness of the planetary logos. So the whole human kingdom is merely a layer of perceptual consciousness of the planetary logos. And when we talk about the earth, we're just talking about its physical body. The planetary logos also has an emotional body. It has a mental body. It even has a causal body on its own level. So if we talk about the destruction of the earth in a physical sense, which is I think what you're getting at, and that would probably require an asteroid hitting it or something, but if that were to happen, the planetary logos as a conscious deity with all of its sub-qualities of itself, that still exists, and it will undoubtedly over millions of years take form through another. It'll take another planetary form. It'll incarnate again, but we're talking of millions and millions of years of process. So what it does is, if we destroy the earth, and let's say it's impossible for the logos to do what it needs to do to evolve through this globe, let's just say that that's the case, it simply means that this globe, which is its physical garment, is no longer adequate to serve what it needs to do to continue to evolve. And so it will eventually incarnate again through another globe. And indeed, those of you who have studied theosophy, and obviously you have, I don't know if you've studied rounds, chains, and globes, but I don't know how familiar you are with that. A little bit, okay. Well, a good example on a more microcosmic level, but it's a good example, is when we look at the moon. The moon is actually, from an occult perspective, the moon is the carcass of our planetary logos's last incarnation. Think about that for a minute. The moon is the carcass of our planetary logos's last incarnation. And you've heard of the moon chain disaster. Have you heard that term, the moon chain disaster? And the great calamity that took place in millions and millions of years ago in the mythology of our Earth's evolution. It is said that here I'll get into the mythology about it, and this is in theosophy now, that when there was a time when the Earth and the planet Venus were like brother and sister at the same level of evolution, and that there was that the Earth made a misstep, which is really the basis of so many world religions that talk about the fall, some sort of a fall, but it has its roots in something that happened to the Earth as a logos probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of years ago. And we're told just fragments of what that was, the misstep, but it had to do, all we know is it had to do with the Earth opening its heart too quickly and unleashing premature compassion, of all things. And the solar logos, now that's the entity that ensouls the whole solar system. So that's like a greater God. That solar logos, our Earth is a constituent part of the solar logos. So God is a relative term, you understand. In fact, our Earth is a chakra within that solar logoic realm. The solar logos forced our Earth, our logos, to abandon its incarnation and reform itself, kind of like hit the reset button. And it reformed itself and reincarnated itself on this planet. This is its manifestation. So the moon is the carcass of our logos's last incarnation. And that's why in esoteric astrology, the moon is said to be the great symbol of the past, because it is the past. And you know, I've read this, I haven't confirmed this, but I've read this from a couple sources where NASA has brought some moon rocks back, and they've actually found some moon rocks that seem to be older than anything they found on the Earth. I only bring that story up to say that in theosophy, there's this idea that the logos, the planetary logos, will abandon an incarnation, a physical incarnation, in this case for not a nuclear holocaust reason, but for another reason, and reincarnate itself. And that's why, and even life was was related to the moon. You know, I believe it's in the Secret Doctrine, where we're told that the Buddha was the last to achieve on the moon chain, and that the Christ was the first to achieve on the earth chain. I don't know if you know what chains are, and it's one of my favorite presentations, but usually when people hear about it, they go, "You've got to be kidding me." But there's a whole set of globes, chains, rounds. I would really have to dive into that fuller for you to understand it, or everybody to get a hold of what I'm saying. I only bring up the moon chain disaster, as it's called, as an example of what would happen if today our Earth went through a cataclysm, either human caused or other sources that are causing it, that requires the Logos to abandon this globe. It will still, in its nature, begin an incarnational process into another globe. But talk about delaying evolution. Wow.
Thank you for that elaboration. I'll cease to be concerned about what might happen to us. And just a quick, interesting about the moon. Would that be because a reason that my Theosophical Society member father, who joined Theosophy as a teenager way back in the early 1900s, he used to say, "Don't let the moonlight shine on your bed," because the moon was a dead planet.
Yeah, it's a carcass. And that's why your whole lower nature is sometimes called your lunar vehicles. And that's why the causal body is called the solar vehicle. And in esoteric astrology, the moon's position in your chart is speaking of, it addresses instinctual patterns from the past in your life, in your consciousness, that some of those patterns may indeed be holding you back. So there's a whole process of understanding the need to transform the moon's tendency that's still within us, lift it to a higher octave, because often the past is the great enemy to the future. The habits of the past are the enemy to the future. And so esoteric astrology sees the moon as being something that needs to be transformed to help us move forward. And now you know the deeper reason why.
Thank you very much.
Hello, William. Thank you so much.
Hello.
It's been fascinating. I'm trying to make a connection between the fourth and fifth initiation and the original handout that you gave us on the human constitution, and where that relates to the planes above the causal.
Okay. Let me do that. Let me take and put the Constitution up on the screen, okay? And let's take a look at that. Hope you can see it now. And I'm going to bring it now so that it's the whole thing. So this is what you should be looking at on in your paper, okay? And let me get the my little pointer here. So here's this little triangle here is the causal body found on the higher mental plane. And when you when you become a fourth degree initiate, it means that you've freed yourself from the causal body, and now you reside, you're in the Buddhic plane here, the Buddhic plane. Now the Buddhic plane is where the base of the ashram is found. So when you enter into the Buddhic plane, and rather than getting an intuitional glimpse of it, you actually hold your consciousness there as a fourth degree initiate, you are living on the Buddhic plane. Now, the Buddhic plane is interesting because it's a plane that is perfectly harmonized. It's ruled by the fourth ray. It's the fourth plane, but it's pure harmony. Whereas anything below it is where conflict can arise, harmony through conflict. But the Buddhic plane is the plane of pure harmony. In fact, it's the balance point between the upper three planes and the lower three planes. So it's the middle, it harmonizes vertically as well. Now, the Buddhic plane has got a couple other names. It's been called the plane of Christ. So it is the plane that is, in its nature, profoundly Christ-like. And it's also called the plane of pure reason with a capital P and a capital R. It's the place where there's synthesis between mind and heart in a profound way. So a 4th degree initiate is living here. Now, a 5th degree initiate, in trying to answer your question, if I understood it correctly, that 5th degree initiate is actually lifting the consciousness to this plane, the plane of Atma, the Atmic plane. Now, the Atmic plane is where the master is polarized, and it's like right next to the monad. But if we want to get real technical about it, it's only at the 6th initiation where you fully become the monad in the fullest absolute sense. And so each of these is kind of a step up a ladder. And so that's where a 6th degree initiate lives. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And the evolutionary story from the 6th initiation on is so different than below that. And there's a whole reason for that, but it's like a whole different regime, and that's why I don't spend too much time going beyond the 5th, because it would require a whole different set of discussions. But the point is that if that's what you're asking, I hope that clarifies it a bit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
How do we thank William?
Well, thank you.